Welcome and thank you for joining us today for the Last Christian Podcast. We're so blessed to have you join us. It's time again to join Brother J.D. Williams in seeking the hope and glorious appearing of our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ, chasing away the worries of the world and replacing them with the blessed hope. Where in a moment, in the twinkle of an eye, at the last trumpet, the dead will be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. Brother J.D. Williams insists there must be a final person, or last Christian, to accept Christ before the sound of the trumpet. Will it happen today? Here now, Brother J.D. Williams.
And welcome to another edition of the Last Christian Podcast. My name is J.D. Williams, and I have the distinct honor and privilege today of welcoming in my guest, Mr. Luke Grimm. Luke. We were talking about how not to mess up names, and so right off the top, of course, I have to mess up your name. My apologies, sir. But welcome to the Last Christian Podcast.
JD, thanks for having me. Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Great to be here, too. I like your intro.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, you know, this show, and I am unashamed by this at all. This show is truly to find that last individual to accept Jesus Christ before the rapture. Thank you for giving me this opening, because just like there is a last play in a football game, there is that last individual to accept Jesus Christ before the rapture of the church. Now, there's going to be people saved after the rapture, no ifs, ands, and buts about it. But there has to be that last person to accept Jesus Christ before the rapture. Think about it. Once the rapture happens, there's still going to be people saved, but they're saved after the rapture. And guess what they got to go through? 7 years of the worst time in the history of time. In fact, the worst in the history of time, and it will never be that bad again. And all you've got to do to avoid that is to accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. All you've got to do is say, Lord, I am a sinner. Please forgive me. I know that Jesus Christ died for me on the cross. I know he spent 3 days in the tomb. I know he rose from the grave just like he said he would. I know he was seen by more than 500 people before he ascended to heaven. And I know he's coming back for his church, because he promised us that he's going to come back and he's going to gather all Christians, living and dead, in the air with him before the earth has to go through those 7 great years of tribulation where God just unleashes all of his wrath on the earth. So if you have not accepted Jesus Christ as your Savior, please do that today and avoid that. You just might be the last one. You might be that last Christian, that last individual to accept Christ that we're looking for. Again, thank you, Luke, for giving me that opportunity. I always get that in at least once, and you teed me up. So thank you for that.
I think your intro reminds us there is a spiritual battle going on, and sometimes we just become numb to it.
Right.
We're like, oh, I'm just you. No, this is a real daily thing. Like, right now in our lives, in our families, there's a real war for our soul to either follow Christ or to not.
Absolutely.
So I love the intro, man.
Well, I appreciate that. And Luke, maybe you thought you were going to escape the question by being so nice to me right off the top. Okay. But here it is. I ask this of every guest that comes on my podcast, and that is, just who in the heck is Luke Grimm?
Goodness, you know what's funny about that question? Let me paint a quick picture, then I'll tell you.
All right.
I remember vividly being in a room of maybe, 50 or 60 senior NCOs in the Army, senior non-commissioned officers. We had to go around, hey, everyone stand up and tell us a little bit about yourselves. And everyone did the identical thing. They would stand up. My name's Captain So-and-so. I'm from this 2-4 Cav, and I've been deployed here for 6 months.
Right.
And the next person would take their cue. That's how they would introduce themselves. And I'm watching this because I've realized it's happened again and again. When we introduce ourselves, I think that is our identity. So with that in mind, my name is Luke Grimm. I'm a Christian father, a man of God. My wife and I, we have 8 children here on the south side of Indianapolis.
Wow.
We go to a church a little bit south of us. We homeschool our 8 children. I lead a men's group, and I lead a Bible study. Those are 2 separate things. I am a public school teacher. I do 12th grade government, and I am in charge of our alternative education program for juniors and seniors that are not on track to graduate. I retired from the active duty Army in 2017, so I spent 20 years doing stuff. And before that, my 18 years of just living, my dad was in the military for those 18 years, so I spent the first 38 years of my life just being in a military atmosphere and the structure is healthy, the rules are healthy, but the more I got promoted, the more I could kind of question some things. But yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell. I big into reading books, big into jiu-jitsu, and I love walks on the beach.
Well, I will stay away from you if you're ever angry, because I don't know any of that martial arts type stuff there. I had a friend that was a 3rd-degree black belt, and he tried to teach me a little stuff, but that's him and not me. Anyway, first of all, thank you very much for your service to this country. How many places were you stationed, or you have any kind of idea? I know some people say, it's too many.
I do. So it gets a little wonky, because if you go somewhere for 2 months of training, does that count?
Yeah, sure it does.
Yeah, so this is I think the 26th place I've resided.
Wow.
And if you add in the different training spots, I was probably stationed in 20 places. But as far as overseas, go to Korea, got some deployments to the sand, go to Korea again, got some more deployments to the sand. The best place my family we ever got to go, we were stationed in Hawaii for a little over 3 months. So from 2012 to 2015, that was absolutely fantastic. I would do that again.
Well, now, you talked about how many kids you got and all these different things that you do educational-wise and helping people out left and right. Where do you find the time? I can barely find enough time to run a radio station and do these silly podcasts. How do you do it?
Time, yeah. I think I am incredibly blessed with a wife that supports me whenever I have some crazy idea. I want to do this. What do you think? I support you, Luke. Oh my gosh, thank you. Having the support of the house. If we had conflict, I wouldn't do anything. So, but my wife does the homeschooling. I support with some of the upper level math or the editing on English stuff, but she runs the show. I'm the principal, but she's the teacher.
There you go. Okay. And I, having a dad that was in education, I understand exactly where you're coming from on that. But
almost 50 years, I think. Right?
Yeah, 49 years as a school teacher. Yes, sir.
That's a long time to serve people. That's just fantastic.
He loved it. He loved every second of it. Now, I want to get into what you do. And I know you have a website right now, and I'm looking at it, and for people that know me, they know I'm always checking out my screen over here. I've got things happening all the time. But you have a website, and it's called These 16 Things. So I'm going to ask you exactly what that means, and then also tell us about the website and what you're trying to show.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And each one of these 16 things, if we just pick one, we can have a long conversation. Some I think are more important than others. Okay. So here is the gist of it. When it comes to teaching kids, if I said, I should teach my 5-year-old this thing, most people would I don't know, they're too young. Give them some time. Let them be kids. Let them grow. Okay, so we do that. Then that 5-year-old becomes a 13-year-old teenager, and having tough conversations and important conversations, they're awkward. They're uncomfortable. And many parents, I'm guilty of this too, are like, well, I'm just not going to have that conversation. We'll let them learn on their own.
Right.
Then that kid becomes 18. They go off to college. They come back for Christmas or New Year's or Thanksgiving, and you don't recognize that child because that child was revolutionized in a philosophy class at college. That child of yours is now an activist of some sort that you don't know how it happened.
Right.
And it's almost like that opportunity's gone. So Brian Perry, he started this and brought me in at the beginning. We understand this age band of teenagers that they want to look at parents as the expert of these things. Parents want to bring their kids in and have these tough conversations, but too often, JD, we react. Something critical happens, a kid was bullied and picked on, we react. A kid failed a class, we react. A kid was caught surfing something they shouldn't online, we react. A kid went bankrupt and they have no money, we react. What we're trying to do with these 16 things is highlight things that we think are important. It could be a hard skill like how to cook, or it could be a soft skill, but it's critically important. And to me, the most important one is on here is standing for truth in Christ. But we have these things that we want to prepare them very intentionally. These 16 things, we kind of go through each of them, different variations each week, and like, hey, sit your kid down. Would you please? Because I do it too. Brian wrote the newsletter for this week. I'm going to sit my kids down this afternoon or tomorrow and talk about whatever Brian wrote for this week. And I'm saying, look, this is so important. Kids, I love you. I care about you. But let's have a tough conversation. So that's what this is about. There's no money involved. There's no cost. We're trying to get people to look through these 16 different items and say, you know what, that interests me. I would like some ideas. I would like some lesson ideas to sit my kids down and show them that I care and be intentional. So there it is, JD. We're trying to teach not teach. That's not right. We're trying to encourage parents.
Okay.
Be intentional with your kids.
Right. Well, I think I told you before we got going that we have been blessed with 2 of our grandchildren to raise. They're 10 and 11 years old. And I can tell you, having raised 5 kids, that the changes that have taken place since we raised our children to the way that society deals with things now are almost 180 degrees. I mean, it's unbelievable. And the schools are not, in my opinion anyway, at least not here, teaching kids what they really need to know. They teach them to take a test. That's really what it is. We're going to teach you to where you can pass this test, but as far as skills that you can use in the world or even common sense, it's not there. Do you guys address that?
We do. That is actually that was the catalyst for getting Brian to tackle this, because he homeschools his 7 kids.
Ah, okay.
Right. Well, his wife does. He'll tell. His wife does. We both know better than to say we do.
Right.
Is that we're looking at the school system thinking we would have no problem sending our kids to school if the school would teach them not only the basics of learning school stuff, but also not tear apart our own morals. Why would we send someone to a school that is going to actively counter the morals and values we teach at our house?
Right.
Why would I do that?
Right.
And also, how about this one? I heard a great TED Talk, and I'm very cautious about TED Talks. I usually have a bias, but this person was stating that education system gets it wrong because of the tests that you brought up, JD. So we will teach a student how to work with trinomials, how to factor trinomials. Most kids are not going to be factoring trinomials when they're 22 years old.
Right.
They're not. It's nowhere in. It wasn't in mine.
Right.
Even if you're forced to take calculus, you're not going to go factor trinomials. Well, how about we teach them to do things they're already kind of good at, and we just ramp that up and put them. Yes, JD. I am absolutely in concert. So these are 16 things that we would argue are not currently taught in public school, and I am a public school teacher.
Amen. Thank you. Yeah. Then we need.
I would not put my kids. Thank you. I would not put my kids in public school.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, ours go. But I will say this though: where we live now, it's pretty much. I describe where we live as 1950s Mayberry, because that's really what this place is. The city I live in has 3,000 people total. So everybody knows everybody else, for good or bad. They know everything about you, all your business, okay? Because, we're just too small. So they have one elementary school, one junior high, one high school. They don't say it. It's not the way they list it, an intermediate or something like that. But anyway, it's one elementary school, it's one junior high, and it's one high school. They're side by side by side. That's it. Okay, so you got the same people that you go to school with, and they're in your classroom from first grade through 12th. You got teachers that really care, and so we don't have the problems here in this little rural area that they do where I grew up, the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, or the big cities and all that. So we're blessed and thankful for that. But you live in Indianapolis, or around Indianapolis, right? So,
that's correct, yeah.
And I actually spent some of my, I told you I worked for American Airlines, and I spent some of my time in Fort Wayne and in South Bend. At one time, I managed both airports at the same time, both Fort Wayne and South Bend, flying to and from those cities every day. So you can imagine what that's like, okay? And I found out what snow effect is while I was up there too, by the way. Don't like it. Anyway,
it was snowing this morning, by the way.
Yeah, well, here it's about what? Today I think it's 70, tomorrow it'll be 90, and the day after that it'll be 30. That's just the way it is. But What are your challenges in Indiana? Because when I was up there, it was a pretty conservative area. Is that still the case?
It is. The subject to teach is government. So I enjoy when we get to elections and voting. I enjoy pulling up the electoral maps.
Right. Yeah.
We'll go back 2008, 2012, 16, 20. And I enjoy pulling up any state anybody wants to. I'll let any student pick any state. And I'll pull up the red and the blue of the state. And I allow them to see that the blue is in the cities.
Right.
And the red, at least in Indiana, is everywhere else.
Right, exactly.
Georgia, somebody pulled up Georgia last Wednesday. We're doing this, and there's Atlanta, there's Augusta.
Heavy blue. Mm-hmm.
All right, there's Columbus, blue, and everywhere else is red.
Right.
And so they start to understand there's some really big differences. My friend Brian, he lives in the country. Mm-hmm. He's got about 11 acres. I don't. I have a quarter acre. And so some of the challenges would look like this. Your rural area of Texas and then the urban section of Indianapolis, those schools, the public school districts get funding.
Right.
Some of the funding comes from our property taxes. We know this. Mm-hmm. They get some state, but there's a big chunk of the federal. Now, the issue with the federal funding, and by the way, I went and got my master's in ed leadership from University of Indiana. So it was interesting going through some of this learning. Well, when the money comes in, a state has a choice. They could turn it down. A district could turn it, not a state holistically, but the school districts could say, no, thanks, we're good. Well, what school district is going to turn down millions of dollars?
Right.
They don't.
Right.
Okay. Well, what sort of strings get attached to that federal funding?
A bunch.
Yeah. So here we go. So this is why a lot of suburban and rural school districts are starting to pop up with the DEI, the diversity, equity, inclusion, the critical race theory, the books in the libraries. Mm-hmm. It's because when they accept these federal dollars, there are strings attached that you must show as a school district you are starting to implement these things. Uh-huh. Now, it started in the cities, but it's trickling to suburbs and rural because it takes time to implement things. Yeah. I don't know where the safe place is. I'm not saying we got to pull kids out. That is not my argument. I'm not saying pull kids out, but it's there.
Well, it is there, unfortunately. And even here, we had one issue, the first one that I've known of since we've been here, where a parent came across a book that was being that was in the schools. And honestly, I couldn't tell you what the name of it was. But anyway, it wasn't acceptable. And we have a very small school district building and all that basically exploded the very first time that there was a meeting. I'm surprised that they didn't have to put screens outside. It was that big. And they got rid of that one book. It's gone. They voted it out. But anyway, yeah, you're right. It trickles down, and that's unfortunate. But I want to get back to your stuff here. And I'm speaking directly to your website of these 16 things. The very first one, the very first thing that you have up there is something that I really like, and that is negotiating with Christ-like character. Character being so important. I'm going to let you elaborate on what is part of that.
When we, as adults, we're talking about parents now, when we as adults interact with other adults, rarely are our children there to watch.
Right.
So rarely do our children watch an example of how to interact with people, how to negotiate. So how do we teach them how to do this right? We usually don't. Everyone listening understands what I'm saying. We usually don't sit our kids down and say, this is how you do it.
Right.
And if you're in business, you don't bring them to work with you. You don't. We come home at the end of the day. We're ready to sit down, take our break, get our time, have our food, watch our show on the TV. When do we interact with the kids? So the kids don't watch us how we negotiate and how we interact with other people with Christ-like character. Right. So where do they learn it from? Well, the only remaining choices is going to be TV, the internet, and at school. Which of those three do we think are teaching them how to negotiate and deal with people with Christ-like character?
Zero.
None of them.
Right.
That's right. And so we expect them to finish high school and go out there and learn how to show respect and dignity towards others and show grace and compassion and understand what it means to compromise, but what are you compromising on?
Right.
So the word compromise means to give something up, but it doesn't mean to give up your character and principles. Okay, so negotiating with Christ-like character. To negotiate implies I want something, you want something, we shake hands eventually, we both get something. But that's not what culture tends to teach. Culture tends to teach that you scream and you yell the loudest until people cave and give you what you want.
Right. Yeah.
When we send our kids to college, that's what they're going to see. I'm not against being an activist because there are things that matter, but just yelling and screaming and get what you want is not the way to handle this.
Absolutely.
And if we're going to be a representation of Christ, so let's take it to Scripture. Whenever Christ would interact with someone doing something wrong, I can't think of a single example where Jesus comes up to somebody and just out of the blue digs on somebody. It is always when the person comes up to Jesus and asks a gotcha question, or interacts with them, and now it's game on.
Right.
And so when he interacts, he may call a spade, you brood of vipers, but there was respect, there was dignity, and the person on the other side had to process, this guy just showed me grace and compassion, but also truth.
Right.
How do I process that? So we need to teach our kids, how do we show grace? How do we show compassion? And at the same time, learn how to show truth, because truth does exist.
Yeah.
And if we don't teach them how to pair all that up, our kids are going to go flounder. And, JD, if I could compound that, COVID. We have a generation of teenagers that have been hiding, not of their own fault, I don't think, behind masks.
Right.
Not talking to people. They would rather have their face down, sending a text message to somebody in the room they're in, interacting with them. So we have to win back some ground on this.
Well, there was one, just to pick up on what you were saying there, before we moved out here, out into East Texas, we lived in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and there was a complex that we lived near, and there was a group of kids all together. I was 6 or 7 of them, sitting in a circle, and they were all typing on their phone. And they were actually communicating with each other, not vocally, but on their phones. And the way I know that is because I would see one type, I would see another one get it and laugh, and then type in, and then this guy starts laughing over here, and then this one and that one, and they were what is communication? I mean, how in the world do you go from vocal communication to that garbage? I mean, that's crazy.
Okay, so think about the second and third order effects of that. Those teenagers at some point are going to date and look for a spouse.
Right.
What does that dating relationship look like when that is how they've been raised to communicate?
It's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's kind of how our website works, and I appreciate you bringing it back. So when somebody goes to the website, they sign up for the newsletter, they get it on Monday and Thursday, and we just kind of push out ideas. Like this week, I'll go back to last week because I wrote it for last week.
Okay.
Last week I was pushing on winning some ground back on electronics.
Okay.
Right? Not anti-social media, not anti-phones, not anti-PlayStation. That was not my point. My point was, how do we win some ground back when all our kids do is this thing? And so I led in with the lesson on, you're out at a restaurant, and we've all seen this. You look at a table, there's maybe a family of 5. The husband and wife are just irritable. You can see it. They're not talking. They're not on their phones, but they're irritable. Then you look at the kids. The adults have pushed, like pushing drugs on somebody, have pushed a cell phone onto the 2-year-old to watch Bluey or Mickey Mouse. The 17-year-old has the earbuds in, listening to music, not talking. Then the teenager has the 13-year-old has their own phone, and they're on social media.
Right.
The parents have lost control, and they don't know how to get it back.
Right.
Or, JD, you're at a Target or a Walmart or grocery store, and you see a mom. It's typically a mom doing this, doing some shopping in the middle of the day, and they have 1 or 2 kids in the grocery cart, and they have pushed a tablet onto the kid, and the kid's head is just buried down. So we have a generation of parents that is actively pushing this on little kids, and then when the kid becomes 13 or 14, we don't know how to win back this ground.
Right.
I'm not mad at parents. I'm not judging the parents. I think a lot of parents are frustrated and they would like to find a way to resolve this.
Yeah.
So last week I took a video of the very situation you talked about. I had 5 or 6 teenagers in one of my rooms. My wife was recording. I walked in and I told them all, bury their heads. Get on the Nintendo Switch. Get on the phone. Get on the tablet. And for a minute and a half, nobody responded to me. It was intentional. But it was such a realistic picture.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's crazy. I don't know what's going on. I mean, when I was a kid, and I'm sure when you were, that we wanted to run around and do stuff outside, and I don't know. Now it's all about electronics. Everything's electronics. I've got one grandson that I can't keep off electronics, so we basically have to ban him from electronics, or it just gets so much so centered in on it, he doesn't remember to do anything else at all. So I wish that people could take things back a step. I mean, electronics are great, communication is great, but there's got to be limits. Or do you help parents figure out how to put limits on stuff to where they don't feel bad, where the kids don't feel bad, something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. When we sent out last week's message, we had a conversation, Brian and myself, about is it our role to tell parents how much time a kid should have? Mm-hmm. I'm not in that house. I don't pretend to know the dynamics and everything. So no, short answer, JD, is no.
Okay.
What I would love to encourage some parents to do is tell their kids no.
Yeah.
How about the word no?
Yeah.
We are called to raise our children. There is a calling on parents to raise kids. And if they're looking for a friend, they have other kids their age, or they have a sleepover and they got those parents, I guess. We're not called to say yes to everything.
Right.
And I think we have a generation of parents. I'm 43. I was born in 79. Just barely missed the Atari age. I played a little bit, but I grew up on the initial Nintendo, Super Mario.
Okay.
And so my generation of parents grew up on Nintendo, Sega Genesis, PlayStation, Xbox. That is my generation that they grew up on that. And so who are we to tell our kids no? Yes, kiddo, go play that Xbox till 2 a.m. with a headset, listening to all the vulgar stuff on the shoot 'em up game.
Yeah.
It's just social media with a headset.
All right.
Yeah,
Well,
so
I hate to cut you off in mid-thought, but we have reached the end of the first half of the podcast, and we will be back right after these messages with the second half of the Last Christian Podcast.
Attention podcasters, influencers, media personalities, content creators, and aspiring or existing radio personalities. KRRB Revelation Radio now offers the opportunity to broadcast or syndicate both new or existing shows to all 50 states and more than 160 countries around the world. And if you currently operate a radio station, we offer you the opportunity to add several popular shows in virtually every genre for broadcast on your station. Choose programming from 30 minutes to 2 hours, with each internationally syndicated show adding quality content sure to grow your listening audience. We even have excellent optional services to help you promote your show or station. These services are not only designed for audio use on the radio, but also include tools for use on social media, even YouTube. For more information, visit www.revelationradio.net or email the Ustream It LLC Broadcast Network at office@ustreamit.net today.
And welcome back, everybody, to the second half of the Last Christian Podcast. Again, my name is J.D. Williams, and with my guest, Mr. Luke Grimm. And Luke, I think I kind of cut you off in first half there in mid-thought. If you wanted to finish what you were saying, if you remember or not, we will go ahead and move on.
Man, it seems like 10 minutes ago. There's no way I can remember that. No, we were trucking along, JD. We're doing good. Yeah, let's keep on rolling.
All right. Well, another area here. Now, we had just finished talking about negotiating with Christ-like character. And character, by the way, is something that I feel is lacking in a lot of people right now. I mean, whatever you can get by with seems to be what people are interested in. But I guess did you have a comment to that before we move on?
I did.
Okay.
Gosh, I mean, the word character, it's funny, you look at Marvel movies. JD, I don't know if you've ever watched any of the Avenger movies, like Captain America and Thor. And I was reading a book by Frank Turek. He did the original book of I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. And great guy. We actually watched him speak in February. But he did a book about Hollywood heroes and how they can relate to Christ, Christianity, and character. And I find Captain America and Iron Man. JD, have you seen any of these movies?
Well, I'm going to be real honest with you. I don't watch movies. I just don't.
Yeah.
I just don't.
Well, for anyone watching, the next time you go watch something with Captain America and you look at Iron Man, Captain America starts with character. He doesn't have to progress. That is who he is through and through. And he never compromises his principles.
There you go. Okay.
Iron Man starts very selfish, very conceited, very self-absorbed. And throughout all of these Marvel movies, he comes to the place where he knows he needs to sacrifice himself for others. He developed character.
Okay.
So the next time somebody watches movies with Captain America and Iron Man, look for those. There are examples of character, but I mean, sometimes we need to sit our kids down and define it.
Yeah. Well, just so much now of entertainment is geared toward Grand Theft Auto. It seems like that was one of the games that I saw at one time. What you watch, what you listen to, it really does impact your life. I know experts don't want to agree with that, but it really does. And so, at least that's my opinion of it. I'll put it that way.
JD, I was deployed one time, and I was in a van, not a Humvee, but a van, and the guy that was driving me, Staff Sergeant Penn, he had on some music, and I don't remember what the hip hop song was, and I'm not adverse to hip hop generally, but I listen to lyrics. If I'm against the lyrics, I'm probably against the song. But he had some music on, he had it kind of cranked, and I'm listening to the words. I turn it down. First Sergeant, what'd you do that for? Hey, Sergeant Penn, let me ask you, man, you got kids? It's like, yeah, First Sergeant, I got a couple girls. How old are they? Oh, they're 9 and 14. 9 and 14. All right, so this is 2011, JD. Okay. CDs, people would still buy CDs. And I said, Sergeant Penn, would you go to Walmart and buy this CD for your 14-year-old? And before you give it to her, you open up the CD case and you throw away the disc. And then you take the cover art and you get a Sharpie and you Sharpie it all out. So the only thing you're giving your 14-year-old daughter are the lyrics. Would you buy this album for your 14-year-old daughter? And he thought, I was like, first, I've never heard it pitched that way. I said, we listen to it because we think we're numb to it, but it hurts our character, man. Garbage in, garbage out.
There you go. That is it exactly. And I think that kind of leads into the next thing I want to talk about, which is you have a section here on your website that says truth and standing for Christ. So you want to tell the truth and you want to stand up for Jesus Christ. That's two good things. I'm for that. Go ahead.
I think at least everyone should be good for the first half. So if you go to these16things.com with a 16, these16things.com, to me, this is my most important of the 16. I believe that so my oldest 7 kids are girls. So I have 7 daughters, then our last kid's a boy. In that if I take them to church with me, but I never talk to them about Jesus, the only thing they're going to get throughout an entire calendar year is 1 hour every Sunday from church. Right. So 52 hours out of an entire year. Do we think that that's enough to teach our kids truly about Christ? The answer is no. Something has to be done at home. But okay, let's say I'm a normal parent and I don't do that. I don't teach them. I just hope they go to church. Well, fast forward until they're 16, 17. I'm like, oh, they got to be a Christian. Why do you think that? Because they've been in my home.
Yeah.
They turn 18. They turn 18. They go off to the workforce or college. We'll use college as an example. They go to college. They get a dorm roommate. And their dorm roommate finds out that they're a Christian. And they ask them, this is the question. Now, parents, you are not allowed to help your kid. They're gone.
Right.
They have to stand on their own. And the dorm roommate says, hey, JD, why are you a Christian? Mm-hmm. And there it is. There's the question. Right. Your 18-year-old now has a chance to stand it or crumble. And there are 2 answers you do not want your kid to respond with. First off is, well, I don't know. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. And the second one is, my parents made me go to church.
Right.
Either of those 2 answers, you can't help them. You don't even know what's happening.
Right.
Your child's faith will crumble. They will become another statistic of another youth that left the house and left the church. Mm-hmm. Okay, so how do we fix that? We got to get them ready to stand for something that matters, stand for truth. And it takes us being very, very intentional. Right. Now, being a government teacher, JD, I believe in challenging my high school kids. You know, immigration, abortion, LGBTQ, I don't care what the topic is. Right. Let's get some challenges and let's get some critical thinking. Why can't we do that at the house? Why can't we at the dining room table, electronics all pushed to the side? Mm-hmm. Say, sweetie, I got a question for you. You might think you have the answer, but I'm not going to save you on this question. I'm going to let the silence linger. Sweetheart, why are you a Christian? Mm-hmm. And you stare at your kid, and you let that awkward silence last a full minute. Do not rescue your child on this. And you work through it. Why'd you get baptized? And you let them sit there and process in a safe environment at your home, at your table. And our job is not to give them that answer. Otherwise, they just regurgitate what we say. Right. It is their heart. Right. It is their faith. Right. But it's our job. It is 100% our job to say, look, scripturally, this is where baptism comes from. JD, the first red ink, if you have a Bible that has red ink when Jesus speaks, the very first red ink is in Matthew when Jesus is getting baptized. That's the first red ink anywhere in the Bible.
Wow. Okay.
You know, he does it. And John the Baptist, he didn't go to seminary. He didn't go to a Bible college. You know, so why can't we talk about baptism with our kids at our house in a controlled environment and allow our kids to push back with us? Because when they leave, they will be challenged.
Right.
We can't safeguard them, but we can prepare them, JD. So this is really important to me.
Yeah. Well, number one, you just told me something I didn't know, which is the first red ink was. I mean, it's something I never even thought about, to be honest with you. But you taught me something today. Good for you. Okay. Good for you. But, you know, I can relate to the kids getting away and going away because I went to the University of Texas at Austin. There is a complete street called 6th Street in Austin. It is nothing but bars, back to back to back to back, the whole thing. That's where the University of Texas student body goes every day, every night. I promise you. I know. I went to Texas. I know. Okay. But you do have to teach your kids to stand up for truth, to stand up for Jesus. I get that. And that's something that we do here in this house is kids ask us a question. We try to be as honest with them about it as we possibly can from a Christian perspective, from a biblical perspective, going back and showing it to them in the Bible, that type of thing. And then sometimes that's not fun. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
No. So we're talking about when they ask us questions and we're talking about being intentional. Those can go together, but they're usually different things. Picture this. Okay. Any parent with a kid older than 5 has had to teach a kid how to tie shoes. We've all gone through it. Right. So picture this scenario. The question is when? What time of the day does a parent teach their kid to tie shoes? The answer is universally the same. When you're trying to leave the door and get in the car. Right. That's when you need the kid to put on the shoes. Right. So what you're doing is you are reacting. Here's little Susie running at you with the shoes. I need help. Mm-hmm. And so you're in a hurry. You're trying to get in the vehicle. Okay, this is how you loop, swoop, and pull and all that stuff. Rarely does a parent say, oh, it's 10 in the morning. Nothing's really going on. Mm-hmm. Let me just go teach my kid this skill.
Right.
We always react to it. Mm-hmm. I do it too, right? It's not about casting blame. But that paints a picture of when do we react and when do we intentionally teach our kids these things? If we wait for our kids to come to us with questions, they may not come to us with all the questions. They may have gone to others. Can't help that.
Very true.
But can you imagine, JD, a generation of parents that are willing tonight all across America to sit their kid down and say, sweetheart, let's talk about faith and truth. Oh my goodness.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
JD, are you familiar with the phrase controlled chaos?
Yes.
Yeah. So let me paint this picture. I was going through some combative school in the Army. I was down at Fort Benning, Georgia, the Army School for Boys. And we did MOUT, M-O-U-T, Military Operations in an Urban Terrain. So in this particular school, we would have maybe 5 of the soldiers. They'd be inside these rooms. and the room would have no roof. Instead of a roof, you'd have a metal catwalk. So the instructors can be above and they can watch all the chaos in the rooms.
Oh, okay.
We'd have 5 or 6 soldiers lined up at the door with their dummy weapons. They'd go in and they don't know it. But the soldiers that are inside would either have boxing gloves on or shock knives. And they would watch this absolute chaos when they get bombarded by fists and the shock knives. It's chaotic, but it's controlled. It's controlled because we can stop it at any time.
Right.
And we can rewind and rehearse. So that controlled chaos of these conversations is at our homes. When the conversation goes astray, it's okay. It's safe. We can say, hey, sweetie, let's put a pause. Let's both think on it. But tomorrow, after dinner, I'm going to pull you and let's talk about what we thought on. But when they leave the house, it is not controlled chaos. It is just straight up chaos.
Right.
And if they can't stand on their own they're gonna fumble. They're gonna fumble the football.
Yeah. Well, too many parents don't teach kids. Well, religion right now, or Christianity, whatever, is something that, of course, has been taken out of schools, and for the most part, nobody addresses it at home. And I'm speaking even of Christian parents. Nobody really emphasizes Jesus at home. We're too busy. We're too busy cooking. We're too busy cleaning. We're too busy talking about where we're going to go for dinner or where we're going to, your life takes over. If someone was to go to These 16 Things website, do you give them a way of trying to put their life together? I'm trying to come up with a proper question here. Some kind of a schematic, a way of talking to kids, when to talk to them. I'm really struggling for the question. I really am, but I know what I'm trying to get to, but I can't get the words right. Are you giving them a pathway, a direction to go?
So we want to be careful because we don't want to preach like we are the subject matter experts, because we're not. We're just regular dads, but we're just dads that are trying to be intentional.
Okay.
Right. And I believe this phrase wholeheartedly. Jesus doesn't call the qualified. Jesus qualifies those he calls.
Amen.
So we are not overly qualified people. We're just regular dads. So who are we to tell somebody this is when you do it? What we are trying to demonstrate through example is by using the dinner table again and again and again and again as an illustration. In one of the videos I recorded, it's not high quality. We're still working on this, but one of my daughters, she recorded me talking to my 12-year-old in the kitchen about pride and humility. She said, Naomi, I'd like to go to the dining room table and just have a tough conversation. Are you ready? Sure, Dad. And I physically grabbed her by the wrist and I kind of pulled her slowly and I let go. But it was just to demonstrate, get your kid to the table.
Right.
We sat at the table and I went through like a 2-minute back and forth kind of a skit. She knew what I was doing, but just trying to demonstrate it's not tough once you're in the conversation.
Right.
But what happens is getting to the conversation, man, we got to make time, JD. And then let's say you do make the time. Some parents, if they're like me, can get a little, that adrenaline is flowing. Oh, man, electronics. My 16-year-old, she is not going to like this conversation. So our heart starts beating. We get the shaky knees of adrenaline because we think there's going to be conflict.
Conflict, right. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and so we want to avoid it. But once you push through that and you're actually at the table and you're in the conversation, all of that adrenaline's gone. Mm-hmm. We know this because this happens to us in sporting events. We get adrenaline before it starts. Right. Once we're in it, we're good.
Right.
A speech, exactly. You get adrenaline before a speech, but once you're in it, you're good.
Right. Well, now another topic that you've got here is how to understand your power and its limits. And yeah, parents have a lot of power, or at least they think they do. So explain that one a little bit.
Sure. The one way we took it a couple weeks ago was me and my illustrations. Here's an illustration.
Okay. As
a parent, you get back from work about 5:30, 6 o'clock. You're tired. You're probably not trying to go home and check homework. You're probably not trying to go home and cook a meal. You're hoping your significant other cooked the meal.
Right.
And you probably can't wait to take your shoes off, put on some sweatpants, kick up your feet, enjoy a meal, maybe open the fridge and have a beer. We can all picture this scenario.
Right.
And you turn on Netflix and you want to watch your show. And before you know it, it is 9:30 at night. You have not had any conversation with anybody. And listen, you rewind the last 4 hours and you say, how did I become a better person? The answer is you didn't.
Right.
Well, let's amplify that.
Okay.
The time of this recording is March 13th, 2023. March 13th. JD, if you and I were going to rewind to February 13th, how did you and I improve our own lives in the last 30 days? I don't know. Let's amplify that again. March 13th of last year. In the last year, what have you and I done to get out of our comfort zones, to stretch our boundaries, to understand what our limits truly are? This is a question for everyone. Now, back to the image of the person sitting on the couch, watching their TV. What image do you think your kids just saw? Oh, my dad, I'm speaking as a dad now, my dad doesn't try to get out of his comfort zone, do anything hard. My dad's not signing up for college classes. My dad's not working out. My dad is not doing this thing extra. My dad is comfortable. Right. My dad is complacent. I'm not saying my dad doesn't care, but I'm saying that my dad is in a comfort zone.
Gotcha.
Now let's take that to the kids, JD, because we're talking about kids. Your kid is 18 years old, a senior in high school. Your kid comes home from work. Maybe they're working at Walmart, stocking boxes, right? Nothing wrong with that. Working hard. They come back and say, Dad, oh my gosh, you won't believe what happened to the manager today. No, what happened? He didn't come in. He just quit. Oh my gosh, what'd you do? Well, they needed someone to step up and be the manager. Oh, Johnny, that's great. So what'd you do? I said, no, thanks, I'll pass.
Oh,
Johnny, why wouldn't you have done that? Why did you pass? Because I'm comfortable. I know my routine. I'm good. Every parent would pull their hair out.
Right.
So how do we teach our children to step out of their comfort zones and find their limits? How do we teach them not to quit when something's hard? And not just physical limits, but mental, right? Some people take college classes just because.
Right.
So, yeah, we're trying to get people to test their boundaries, get off of the couch, and find something difficult and continue to improve in whatever that thing may be.
Well, that takes work. It takes effort, and it takes motivation.
Oh, wow.
You know, motivation being a big one there.
So we help people with this.
Yeah, go ahead.
Brian, so one other thing Brian and I do, we do obstacle course races, specifically Spartan races. And if anyone's listening, you could jump on SpartanRace.com and check them out. But you know, they have a 5K and a 10K and a 21K, and this race is full of elevation and hills and some mud, obstacles. Maybe you're climbing a wall or carrying something heavy. And when you get done, you get this medal. It's a finisher's medal that you earned. It's not a participation trophy. You had to get to the end.
Yeah, I hate participation trophies.
Yeah. So let's take Brian and me out of this.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so taking Brian and me out of this, this past year, we went all across the central and eastern part of the U.S. We did combined, I think, 43 races combined. We made an event out of it this past year, 2022. We both have just a wall of medals. Well, he contacted Spartan Races, and he got a promo code that and we push this in our newsletter. Here, we got a promo code, save $40. Literally, you're getting 25 to 35% off. So we're trying to give people some incentive, some tools.
Right.
But no good story starts like this. So there I was, sitting on the couch eating a salad. Stories don't start like that.
No. Not ever.
No.
Now, but before we run out of time, I want to get into another area here with you, which is biblical financial literacy. Now, that I'm looking at that one and I'm saying, okay, what in the heck is that? Go ahead, you tell me.
So I also teach economics, and I took a lot of my kids by surprise and some teachers that I strayed from the curriculum. The curriculum would teach debt. The curriculum teaches credit cards and why they're great. Okay, so I'm going somewhere with this. When you get a credit card, then you pay it off every month, you're earning a high credit score.
Correct.
Why do you want a high credit score? So you can go get a loan and get more debt.
Right.
Why would we teach that to our kids? Okay, so, you know, where the debtor is slave to the lender. We have a generation of America that says credit card, it's a multi-billion dollar industry. It is insane. That's just the marketing of credit cards.
Right.
Okay. So what if we could look at what Jesus says in his parables, in his conversations? Easier to enter the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get to heaven. Right. We're trying to make a point that money isn't bad. Money isn't the root of all evil. It is the love of money when money becomes your idol, when money becomes all that matters. And JD, I don't think any parent says, you know what? I know my kid is successful only when they're a millionaire. If they say that, they need to relook things. That's not the mark of success. And so that is our end goal, JD, as we teach this thing, is that the end goal is money is not, that's not the end goal. Because if that's the goal, heck, who cares how you get there? Yeah. Step on who you want. Lie to who you want. Cheat how you want. Right. So we're trying to remove the idea of debt. Brian and I, we have different things we do with our kids. We have a little mini 401k for our kids that their allowance, they can either get the money or we can match the first $100 a year in a little account. We're trying to teach them the benefits of, it's a little mini 401k. Mm-hmm. And he does some stuff, most parents do that, 1/3 of what you get will go into savings, 10% go. But if we teach them this, that's good, but we have to teach them why. We have to be able to show them some scripture and say, look, this is where Jesus again and again and again and again deals with people with money. The one person, I don't remember where it was, it might have been in Matthew, he comes to Jesus, Rabbi, what more must I do? I have done everything. I've followed all the commandments. In other words, he's checked all the boxes. He's ready to follow Jesus. He said, well, sell all of your possessions and follow me. Nope, this guy was out.
Yeah, he was out at that point. Right.
He was out. I don't want my kids to be out.
No. Well, we don't give allowance here. I told you, I've never given allowance to a child. They've got to earn it. And by that, I mean, I'm not saying, we put them in a sweatshop or something like that, but I'm saying, that they've got to actually do something around the house. They've got to take responsibility for themselves and try to do something. That's how I raised the first 5. Okay, now these 2, they're a little bit different because they're grandkids. Okay, so they get a pass on a lot of stuff that my kids never got a pass on. But electronics is a big deal. Okay, well, I'm going to teach them. I've run a business, so I'm going to teach them how to be a part of that business. And so I have a 10-year-old right now, a 10-year-old grandson that is actually, and I'm not exaggerating this, he is actually the executive producer and editor of one of the radio shows that goes on my radio station. He takes the raw footage, he edits it, he produces it, he loads it on the radio station, and he runs it every week. He's 10 years old. He'll be able to do that on any station in the world if he wants to. So
JD, listen, that example, this kid has a skill. And if we nourish that at the house, our school systems aren't going to nourish that. I don't know how to wrap that up and make it the 17th thing, but the concept is great. You found a skill this child has, and we very intentionally nourish it with some financial compensation to that as well. Right. They understand what it's like to work and to earn. I think that's great.
Yeah. Well, I can't give him whatever those forms are. I can't give him one of those. I can't actually show him as an employee, but I can tell you he makes minimum wage. So anyway, he's doing pretty good for a 10-year-old.
Absolutely right.
Now, again, but before we get out of here, one thing that caught my eye, or 2 actually, I'm kind of wrapping them here together, is the value of time. Okay, and believe me, if there's anything I know, it's the value of time. And how to pay less in taxes. That one interests me as a person. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, ironically, how to pay less in taxes is going to be changed here very soon. Because Brian and I found that critical, but very narrow. It's hard to find too many subsets underneath that. But it's critical enough that we put it on there. For me, how to pay less in taxes. Here we go. Teaching 11th and 12th graders economics. It's amazing how many teenagers despise rich people.
Yeah.
And say, why don't they pay more?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes. You understand. Right away we get that. Wouldn't you like to make some money there, kiddo? Absolutely. Well, how much are you willing to pay? And so what that topic does, and we're going to wrap that into biblical financial literacy instead, is what that topic does is it pulls out, are you a giver? Are you an earner? Are you a taker? What do you think your role is in everything? You know, we have labels for these: communism, socialism, capitalism. We have all these economic systems.
Yeah.
How much do you think is fair? I found out last night. Buddy has someone that moved to Belgium, 54% tax rate, and they still have to pay. They still have to buy private healthcare after 54%. What was the other one you identified? Was it value for time?
Value for time, and the one thing I'm going to really excuse me. I'm really going to put some value for time for you. You got 1 minute. That's it.
Yeah. So value for time. Everything we do is worth it. And when we look back at yesterday, was that time well spent, or was that time sitting down watching a movie? No. Everything is worth something. We decide what the priority is. We have control. I only needed 10 seconds for that one, JD.
Yeah, well, you did a good job on that. Again, the name of the website is These 16 Things. Now, you've got a YouTube channel as well.
We do. Yes, sir.
Does that have a specific title?
It does. It is these 16 things, but there's a dash in between each one.
A dash in between each one. Okay, and we'll make sure that that's put up on the screen for everybody that gets this in visual form. Luke, it's been a pleasure talking to you. We actually ran out of time before we ran out of topic, so maybe I can have you back on the podcast one of these days, and we'll continue the conversation here.
It'd be a pleasure. It'd be great. Looks
like you got a lot of great work here, and I really encourage people to go again, these16things.com. And I think that you'll find a lot of value in it. This is for parents and for children. Bring the family together. And, of course, it is all about Jesus Christ. Thank you again, Luke, so much for being on the podcast today. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Be safe. Thanks, JD.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today for the Last Christian Podcast. And please be sure to tune in every Wednesday evening at 7:30 p.m. Central Time for an all-new edition of this prophetic series as we continue the search for the last Christian. Until next week, or until the trumpet sounds, may God bless you.